talking to us today, Ray.
Okay.
Can we start with your full name?
Yeah. It's Raymond Rockefeller Crawford Jr.
Okay.
It's my,
Who were your parents?
well, my father was Raymond Rockefeller Crawford Sr. And my mother was Nora Allardyce.
Can you describe your father's personality?
Personality? That's interesting. Well, my dad was always available. You know, he grew up in Germantown, went to World War II, and then came back and stayed in Germantown his whole life. So he was very, you know, what do I want to say? He was always involved in Germantown and everything that Germantown did, and he always was around for us as kids. Whenever there was something going on, one of the kids, he was involved in it. But he was very community oriented, and so he did a lot of, not just in Germantown, but all over Columbia County. He ran the lumber yard after my grandfather. When he came back from World War II, he gave the lumber yard to my father, and he ran it probably until, I don't have the exact date, till the 70s, I think. And but he was involved in the fire department. He was involved a lot. He was really involved in the American Legion. So he knew a lot about the American Legion.
He was also the police department, right?
Yeah, he and Miller were, Walt Miller were buddies. So he gave Walt Miller a lot of information.
Did he ever talk much about his service in World War II?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was in the Army, and I was stationed in Germany. And while we were there, I gave one of my cars to he and Mom, and they drove back down to Sicily and Italy, where they fought in World War II. So we talked a lot about the World War II. I never went to any of them where he was, the battles, but they did. I know that.
Was he at Battle of Anzio?
What?
Was he at the Battle of Anzio? I got that sense from talking to Leland.
One of the yeah, he was. Yeah, it was in Italy. Yeah.
Did he start in Italy or did he start
No.
in Northern Africa?
He actually he started his military career at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and then he went Patton, started the tank corps, and he went with Patton out to the desert out in California, and that's where they trained. And then he was on the first ships that went to Africa. So he fought with Patton in Africa, all through Africa. And then he was on the landing party at Sicily, and he traveled with Patton through Sicily, and then up the coast of Italy. Anzio was the last place that they finished. When they took Anzio, then he was shipped back home. That was his tour was finished.
Leland mentioned that in that Italian campaign, he saw a lot of the guys from Germantown and Columbia County and some of the other units.
I didn't hear.
You never talked about that.
I never heard that. I'm sure he did, but you know, right now I can't remember that. I don't know if he wrote it that down.
You're talking about when he after the war or
No, during the war. Yeah.
During the war. Well, you see, when he came back, he joined the National Guard in Hudson. And a lot of the guys that were in the war came back and joined the National Guard in Hudson. So that's probably how he knew them. I never talked to him about it. I just know a lot of his buddies from the war were in the National Guard with him.
Now, what did he do when he came back? He said he joined the National Guard, and then what did he do for?
And then, well, No, and then he took over the lumberyard from my grandfather. That was his main function. He expanded the lumberyard, that whole area up there in Germantown. It was a small, mom and pop lumberyard. But after World War II, the building boom in Germantown, and he was involved in that. He provided the lumber and the paint and all that kind of stuff to a lot of the builders here in Germantown. That was his main focus.
Now, his father, Leland
Leon.
Lasher Crawford, do you remember him much?
A little bit. Yeah, I mean, I can see his face today. And I spent a little bit of time up there. I would overnight, stay in their house and that kind of thing. I did lawn mowing for my grandfather and grandmother. Helped them do it in the garden. They had a garden back behind the Reformed Church. They had a big garden back there. And we would go and he would take some of the kids, not all of them at the same time, but one or two. Like I remember he took me and I think, I don't know which other one, but across the river up to the Catskill Mountain House.
Okay.
We did that with my grandfather, and he had a cabin up there in the mountains, and he would take us over there. It was a day cabin, so we would go there. So he would take he'd take each kid, a little at a time, and take us on trips around the area.
Get away from the pack.
Yeah.
Other kids, yeah. So you saw the Catskill Mountain House before it was burned down?
No, I did
Okay.
not.
You saw this.
I saw it after it burned.
Okay.
I saw the ruins before they knocked it down.
Yeah.
And we walked around. It's, the deck was still there. I remember that. But the whole house was caved in. And so, yeah, I do remember that.
Do you remember any stories that your grandfather Leland told? Did he talk history or talk
Of Germantown?
Yeah. Because I think he may have been the first town historian of Germantown. I think he was the first one before Walt Miller.
He could have been. Yeah. He did have a wealth of knowledge. He grew up here. Yeah. A lot of those videos show Germantown in the 30s and 40s. So he
grew up here?
Yeah,
Yeah, it
actually.
was a Lasher.
He was a Lasher.
Lashers don't leave
Yeah.
Germantown.
But his name is Crawford.
Yeah, it was mother's name. That's where she got.
I'm just thinking where the Crawfords came from.
Oh, well.
Crawfords came from across the river somehow.
No,
Early.
the Crawfords were already here.
Yeah,
across the river.
early.
Yeah. I want to say the Crawfords that came from Saugerties were, they came across the river. I know my great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather was the first postmaster of Germantown. And he came across the river for that job.
Okay.
And then the Crawford stayed in Germantown.
Okay.
I think that was like 1880s, 1890. I'm not sure when the post office was established in Germantown. That would be a good question to research.
When did you first start researching genealogy, family history, local history?
Well, as I was growing up, my dad would always talk about, well, this is Lasher and this is Rockefeller and this is Crawford and this is different relatives and who they were and all that kind of stuff. We were, my dad and I think it was Timothy or David. He said, come on, let's get in the car and go. We went across the river to the Saugerties, to the cemetery over there, where the rest of the Crawford Jr.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we cleaned it all up. It was in shambles, you know,
Oh, yeah.
the tombstones were turned over and everything. And so we mowed it and trimmed it and put everything back in place. And we took pictures of it. And I had those pictures.
I think it's possible it's overgrown now.
Yes, I heard Al Shepard was saying so.
I know. Or either you told me or somebody told me. It's a shame that it got that far. But but anyway, so
Did your father talk much about some of the old Rockefellers, like Captain Phil Rockefeller or Isaac P. Rockefeller?
he mentioned them, and I'm sure he talked about them. But I I remember everything with electronics.
Okay.
Ancestry said me that was my uncle, and that's my uncle. So that's kind of how I remember it. I do have some memory loss of everything, so I write it all down. And that's what I do.
Now, what year did you graduate high school?
1967, right here at Germantown. Yeah.
What are your memories of going to school at GCS?
Well, I don't know. I was class president as a freshman, sophomore. Then I was student council president junior and senior year. I'm pretty sure. I might be wrong. But I was always involved in the high school, in school. I played all the sports. All 4 years. So I was captain of the soccer team and the baseball team. I was co-captain of the baseball team with John Shaika, and I was basketball. I played, I think, Kenny Clow and Shaika was on the team. But I played all 4 years, because, as you know, Germantown. We're on the varsity 4 years.
Well, if you're an athlete, you're going to be playing.
You're gonna be playing, yeah. Baseball, I was a catcher. But senior year came around, nobody wanted to be catcher. And I said,
Nobody ever wants to be catcher.
I've never played position, but I think it was like Bill Meesick. He showed me how to be a catcher, and so I played catcher senior year. Wasn't that great? Didn't get a scholarship or anything like that.
Well, it's still like that now. They have to basically force somebody to be the catcher.
Yeah. And I didn't mind it. And I played catcher, softball too. Even as an adult, it didn't bother me at all.
So was there a year that you missed in high school? No, weren't you sick?
Well, that was in my middle school. That was
Middle school.
between 5th and 6th grade. I didn't go to school.
So can we talk about that? What happened?
I got rheumatic fever is what I ended up getting. But it was, I came home this was in the fall. I came home and I had a big high fever, and I just felt like I was, had no strength at all. And my mom, she's a nurse. She was a registered nurse there, and she had some penicillin for somebody else. She called the doc, and the doc said, "Yeah, give me penicillin right away." So she gave it to me, and they swear that was what saved me, because most people that get rheumatic fever back then, they never recovered from it. And so I got rheumatic fever. I was in the hospital for 3 months. I remember being in the hospital up in Hudson over Christmas on vacation. And vacation. I came home in like February, but I was bedridden. I couldn't walk. So they brought, the teachers would bring my homework to the house, and I do it, send it back in. And
So when did this start? October, something like that, maybe?
October, November, yeah, of I think it was 5th grade or 6th grade. I think it was beginning of 6th grade. Because I just don't remember. I can look it up and see, but whatever it is, I know it was, I didn't go to school the rest of the year.
Mm.
I didn't even go, I was over it like in May, but I didn't bother to go back to school. I just stayed home. And they asked me anyway. Took all the tests.
So then, where did you go to college, or what was after high school?
Oh, and then, so I stayed with my class and, progressed and graduated in 67. And I wanted to go to West Point, to the military academy. And so we had an uncle, Edmund Lasher, who was a West Point graduate, class 29. And we talked to him, and he encouraged me to do the prep school. He said, if you can't get in, and at that point, which was like spring, I couldn't get in, not because of grades or anything like that. I couldn't find a senator or a congressman.
Took the letter.
To promote me. Interesting side note. I just turned the thing off. John Shaika, who was this, he and I were vying for valedictorian and top of class. When I announced that I was applying for West Point, John said, "Oh, I should do that too. That sounds like something interesting." So he applied, and his parents knew the congressman that was gonna put, you got to have a congressman. So he was the one I was looking at. John took the congressman, so I had nothing that I was never going to get into West Point. So my uncle, he said, "Well, there's a prep school, but in order to get into the prep school, you have to join the Army, you have to be enlisted." I said, "Okay." He said, "Can I do that?" He said, "Sure." So he helped me get the application, and I was accepted at the prep school, but I had to finish basic training. So right after graduation, like 2 weeks after graduation, I joined the Army and went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, got through basic training. And then I went to the prep school, happened to be at Fort Belvoir, Kentucky, Belvoir, Virginia. So I went to Belvoir for a year, studied, and was accepted in the class. And so I went in 1 July 1968. And then I graduated in 72, 4 years later, and joined, I was second lieutenant. I had chosen field artillery. And my first assignment, I selected Germany. So
Is that, you went direct from prep school to where?
prep school to West Point,
West.
4 years. And then I
West-
graduated from West Point. And when you graduate from West Point, you have to go to your basic course, which was Fort Sill, Oklahoma. That's field artillery. And but you can also take some specialty courses. So I went to airborne school, which was in Fort Benning, Georgia, which is 3 weeks jumping out of airplanes. And then I went to Ranger School, which is at Fort Benning, which is 12 weeks, jungle warfare, that kind of stuff. Because I thought there was a possibility. The Vietnam War was not officially over with. So I thought I might get assigned to go to Vietnam. So I knew I wanted to have my survival. So I went there, and I got out of there in November of 68. And then I drove to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. We spent 3 months there in the basic course. And then Betsy and I, my wife, flew to Germany, and I spent 4 years over there.
So how are you related in school with Rich Jones? Is he older or younger than you?
Rich, he's Ellen's class. And pretty sure
He's
Ellen.
older.
He's a
He
year-
has Ellen's class.
He's a year older.
So he was, I'm just saying that because he did.
Yeah.
Were you were you looking forward to going to Vietnam? Like, were you scared of going to Vietnam?
No, I wasn't scared, but I knew, I mean, my impression was we shouldn't have been there, first of all. But when it was winding down, more and more soldiers were getting killed. And I said, I don't think as a second lieutenant, I can do much about that. And I was seeing what the attrition rates were for second lieutenants in Vietnam, and it wasn't something I wanted to do. So when I had the opportunity at West Point to choose my first assignment, and it was a guaranteed assignment, so I went the other direction. I went to Germany. I said, well, I'll be in Germany for 3 years. The war's got to be over by that time. So, and sure enough, it was. Yeah.
Okay, so then your marriage. Let's see, how did you meet
Oh,
your
yeah,
wife?
I met my wife at West Point in my junior year, and at a football game. She was a blind date. Her father and one of the officers at West Point were classmates, class of 47. And Betsy's mom wanted Betsy to date a cadet. That was one thing she said, you have to date a cadet. And Betsy finally said, okay, get me a date. So she called this colonel who, and then there's a third party, my best man in my wedding. We were roommates at the same time. He said, God, I gotta find a date for this gal. And he said she wants a tall, good looking, athletic, but smart cadet. And my roommate said, well, that's not you, but maybe I'll set you up anyway. So we met, we had our first date, and when I saw her and she saw me, we knew that, it's going to be great. And so we dated most of that year, and then we got engaged. And she actually graduated a year ahead of me. And to be close to West Point, so she visit every weekend, she moved up to our house. She moved in with my mother and father. I don't know if Dennis was still at home, but so she stayed with my folks. She worked at Rhinebeck Hospital. She was an RN.
What year was this?
This was 71, 72. No, 71. From 71 to spring of 72, she worked down in Rhinebeck for 2 years, for a year.
Interesting.
And then in the spring of graduation, she quit and went back home to prepare for the wedding and do all that kind of stuff. And then when we graduated, we were going to get married at West Point, but it was a Catholic church, and the Catholic priest up there said it was the type of, back then, the Roman Catholics and the Episcopals didn't get along. So her parents wanted an Episcopal service, and mom and dad wanted a Catholic service, and the Catholic priest down there at West Point said, no, can't have an Episcopal priest up on my altar. So we said, okay, well, we're not getting married at West Point. So we moved the wedding down to Virginia, to her church. And we had a Catholic church priest and an Episcopal priest there together at the wedding. So we got married 3 days after graduation. We graduated, piled in the car, drove down here to Virginia, and got married, and then we went on a honeymoon to St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. If you talk to, we have Aunt Frances, Uncle Roy, and Father Ed was a bishop.
So what's the relationship between Aunt Frances and your mother?
They were just friends in nursing school down in New York. Yeah.
That's what we covered before. That's all.
Yeah. They became very good friends in nursing school, and it was a lifelong thing with them. They lived in Brooklyn, and they would come up for the summer to our house. But a little sidetrack there, I guess.
Who were some of your favorite teachers at Germantown Central School? Or at least most memorable teachers?
Yeah.
Could be most memorable.
Yeah.
Well, I'll get her name real quick, but the English teacher, Dot Irving, she did honors English. So she really did teach me how to write, and got me involved in reading. Mr. Brenzel was, I think he was math. Yeah, math. And that he got me involved in math, which I needed for West Point. I can see faces, but I don't have the book in front of me.
Yeah.
The history, not the history. Well, yeah, it was history back then. I'm trying to remember who it was. There's not a bunch of, I think I had 2 or 3 different teachers. And the athletic director, we had 2 different athletic directors. And again, I don't remember their names, but they were the only other one that I came very close to was the principal, Mr. Vale. Vale was the principal for 3 years while I was there. He and I had a very good relationship. Of course, me being student council president, he had a lot to say to me.
Did your father or grandfather ever talk about the flagpole that was out in front of GCS for many years up until about 1980?
I know this. I remember the story, but it came from a ship. Where it came from.
Yeah.
And I think it was. I don't remember the name of the ship.
There was Captain Phil Rockefeller's tugboat.
Tugboat.
Pull them out or down.
Yeah.
Hanson Roads or down.
That's it. And yeah.
But I'm just kind of surprised that like nobody at the school remembered that story. Like,
Right.
like there wasn't a plaque in front of the flagpole or anything. You know?
Yeah.
Like most kids went through their whole 13 years at GCS.
Didn't know a single thing about that.
Yeah. No, my dad told me about that. He was the one that told me where it came from.
Well, I think it was your grandfather was the one who donated it to the school. Like,
Yeah, it could be.
It was his grandfather's.
Yeah, and it was lying on the ground or something. It wasn't up. So it was lying on the ground. And it was getting beat up, and he donated. A high school needed a flagpole. So you can have this one. Yeah, that's that. Yeah.
What do you remember about walking to school along the old road, Crawford Lane and Lower Main Street?
Yes, we did. We did do that. Come rain or shine or snow or whatever, we did. My mom and dad didn't think, well, first of all, the road wasn't good enough for a school bus.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, you walk up front, the end of Crawford Lane, or you go this way, you go around on the path and up to school. To me, it was about even. So I was okay with walking. The only thing I remember is at some point when I was younger, my mother would say, "Now you all have to walk to school together." And I think it was Ellen and Lee were always late. So we always, Chippy and I were always out the door, and we had to wait for Lee and Ellen to get there. But we did it.
Was it anything that you need to mention that might have happened along the way? Geese, birds, turkeys. No geese. No issues about geese.
What?
A goose. CDs.
Oh, yeah, there was that story. Yeah, you mean that was nipping at her legs? Yeah, I don't remember that. I remember the story and I remember the game boost, but I don't know what year it was. Whether I was elementary school or not.
Remember much about the Main Street and in some of the active rail.
When we were growing up, I mean, Germantown, well, the train stopped there.
Yeah.
You know, and the cold storage was down there. And that's where a lot of our fruit went, is to cold storage. My dad would sell it to the cold storage and then they would distribute it. But after I left Germantown, I think that, well, first of all, the train didn't stop. I think it stopped running and it stopped stopping in Germantown while I was in high school. I think some
Sure.
yeah, 60s, yeah. But there were a lot of business, a lot of farm business still going on. Co-op, yeah, co-op still there.
Do you remember getting dragged down to a waterfall when you were at Leland? He was,
Oh,
when it was icy and watery.
well, you know, our hill there in front of the house used to be the prime hill for a lot of the kids in the neighborhood. Everybody would come to our house. And my dad, usually like on a Friday or Saturday, he would put a big floodlight up on the tree down the hill. And we must have had 40 or 50 sleds. But the story was, one time it snowed and then it rained, and so there was ice on top of the snow. And when you got going down that hill, you couldn't stop. And you usually ran into the pricker bushes that would stop you before you went over the top to the train. There was one place where off to the left where you would go and you could keep going. The only problem was it had a drop off. There was a waterfall right behind Music's house. And one time I was going so fast, I couldn't stop and I just went straight over. landed at the bottom.
It's probably 20 feet or so.
Yeah. I wasn't, I looked around. It was the first time I ever said, I wonder if I'm dead or alive.
One of the first times.
So then I started feeling my body and said, oh, I'm okay. I survived.
The snow must have saved you, because there's a lot of rocks at the bottom of that.
Yeah, there were a lot of rocks. Yeah.
Did you play in that creek a lot as a little kid?
Well, it was the path. That was one of the paths to get down to the train tracks. The other one was over by where Dave and Yvonne live, down that path to the train tracks. But you know, parents always said, you know, you're not allowed to go down the tracks. So, well, they can't see us, so we'll just go down the train tracks.
Do you remember walking around on the ice in the winter time?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah, the Hudson River would freeze over back then.
Only occasionally now.
Yeah. But I remember, we would walk out onto the ice. We'd go all the way over to the bell, the buoy that's out in the middle of the Hudson River. You could go all the way out there to that and jump up on that. It wasn't very often that you could get out there. But yeah, I mean, the ice, the river froze a lot more back then than it does now. I don't know if that's global warming or not.
Did you ever venture up the tracks to North Germantown or down to
Oh, yeah, yeah, we would walk, yeah. Yeah, we could do that. I could go down to Cheviot. Sometimes we'd take our bikes right all the way up to
Did you ever run down,
Anchorage.
that road behind the cold storage that comes up? Did you ever take that?
Oh, the track, on the side of the track.
No, on the hillside of the brick cold storage. There's a road that goes down to Disher Lane, turns into Disher Lane, Chevy, and then comes out on Chevy Road, just a little bit uphill from the track.
All right. I don't know. I know the road that came from the railroad station up to Germantown, Main Street, but I didn't know there was another. Oh, I guess I've forgotten.
Yeah, it goes south.
Oh, okay.
Down.
Okay, all the way to Chevy. Okay, that's interesting.
What do you remember about Main Street, Germantown, growing up?
Well, the one thing I did want to mention is I do remember, when I was growing up for Memorial Day, the parade started down at the train station. And that was a hill and a half. But I was in the band. I was in high school also. And so we would have to march up that hill. Oh my God.
And all the way back down it too.
And all the way back down.
Can you imagine playing a trumpet or?
See, Palatine Park wasn't there, so there was no place to stop. So we would march from the train station, from that memorial right there, up to Germantown to the high school, stop there, play music and memorial there, and then hike up through the village and all the way up to the cemetery. And
Have a ceremony.
ceremony at the cemetery, and then march back down.
What time did it all start?
It was pretty early. It was
Like
probably
9
like
o'clock?
8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. And it was over by 1 o'clock. Yeah. Trying to remember where we stopped, where we used to come back down to. Because like I said, Palatine, I think we came back down to the high school. We stopped in Germantown. And they had hot dogs for us there. But yeah. The other thing I would mention was that I did give a presentation. I was the guest speaker at one of the Memorial Day parades during the Iraqi War. It was 1990. They invited me to be the speaker at Memorial Day, so I marched up with them and gave a presentation at the cemetery. And I also was invited to they had some sort of ceremony at Palatine Park, the 4th of July, and I gave a military, rah-rah speech. But those were, that was when I was in the Pentagon. And I was a lieutenant colonel, and I had been involved in Iraqi from the Pentagon perspectives. Came back and told everybody it wasn't as bad as it sounded. And oh yeah, the war's going to be over and we're going to be out of the Middle East within 5 years. That was 1990.
So do you remember the Grand Jewel?
Yeah.
So what do you remember about, say, the Grand Jewel? And then compared to the Central Market, and why did your parents shop at one or the other, if at either?
Well, Central Market wasn't as big, and it was, it didn't have this, it didn't have the stuff that we needed. The Grand Jeweler was the store in Germantown, and that's where you got your milk, your vegetables, the meat. Maybe Central Market. Some people did shop at Central Market, but what I remember was Central Market was small things, a pint of this or a little carton of that, whereas Grand Jeweler you could get big box stuff, cereal and that kind of thing. Yeah. So, and then, well, it folded because there were too many other big box stores, two, grocery stores.
Shop right.
And it was so easy to go up to Hudson. Yeah. The big stores were up there and the prices were better. So,
You remember Graduate closing?
I don't think I was here when Graduate closed. I think. Yeah. I remember the drugstore on the corner. It was a real drugstore. I mean, it was, you would go in there and get a soda, get ice cream, that kind of thing. And then the pharmacy was in the back. And then, but then it closed because, people were getting their drugs.
Just drive to Hudson.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And one thing I was going to say was, back then in the early '60s, we still had our milk delivered to us from Hudson. Remember? You
You can ask me, yeah.
But we would have, the milk truck would come to the house, and we would have, we'd give them 6 bottles and give us 6 more bottles.
You remember ice being delivered by truck?
Yeah. If you had some, if you needed some, yeah. In one of those videos, there's a picture of the ice being taken out of the river and put into this ice house. Shows the operation of it.
You know which ice house it was?
I'm pretty sure it was ice house that was up in the village, the ice pond.
Because the ones on the river, I think, were gone by the time these cameras were around.
Yeah, probably, yeah. But they were still they were doing it, the pond.
Yeah, the pond.
There was a big building there.
50s.
It used to be a big building, and that's where they stored the ice.
Yeah, that one was more productive and lasted half a century longer than ones.
And that's where most of us from Germantown got their ice. The other one was more of a, industrial.
For shipping elsewhere.
Yeah.
So what, in your genealogy work, what would you say is the most surprising fact about your family history?
I would, there's a lot of different things that you could say, but how I didn't know how everybody was related, and there was, I want to say there was any inbreeding, but there was a lot of Lashers that were cousins that were married to Rockefellers.
Yeah.
And that was just,
What about
but
the
it's
Revolutionary
all
War
there.
connection?
It's all there. I mean, that's the revolution. Well, I did a lot of research on the Revolutionary War, and that's where I found our ancestor, Samuel Crawford, who was killed in the Revolutionary War. And I've got a lot of ancestry information on who he was, but he was famous. But he wasn't from Germantown. He was from down the White Plains, New York. That's where the Crawfords were at the start of the Revolutionary War. And then they moved up the west side of the river up to Saugerties and stayed there for a while. And then they came across.
Yeah, some of them were Methodist ministers. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah. One of Samuel Crawford's sons was a traveling minister, and that's how he went up the river. Yeah. And
Have you found which?
I found a lot.
What his circuit was, like which churches he was?
It's in there. It's in the writings. I had writings says which towns he went through and all that.
Did you do much work on the Rockefellers in the Revolutionary War, like Dale Rockefeller Jr.?
Well, the Rockefellers are pretty easy to follow because of the book. The Rockefeller.
Yeah.
Do you have a copy of the?
Yeah, well, one full set, other doubles.
Okay, yeah. And that's how I tracked through that whole book, and found everybody that way. And I can show, the other thing is when I joined the Sons of the American Revolution, I'm a member, I think membership's elapsed, but but in order to get in, you had to do your direct line lineage, and I did that. It's funny because I started with the Rockefellers because it was in the book. It was easy, you could track it. But I got about halfway done. And I said, I'll bet I can do Crawford's. So I started back with Samuel, and I followed that up and got to Germantown. What was kind of I thought was kind of weird is that there were Rockefellers in Germantown during the Revolutionary War. There is a Rockefeller that was a member of the regiment that Livingston put together in the Revolutionary War, and that was yeah,
on the Committee of Correspondence, the Albany County Committee of Correspondence, Philip Rockefeller.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys come through Philip Rockefeller or not, but he was a second generation.
I think he was a cousin, I think, something like that. Yeah. But yeah. So I did both Rockefellers, both Crawfords, and SAR, and have all that documented. That was fun to do that genealogy.
Were there any in your genealogy work that you find out that you're related to any friends from school? Did any of those light bulbs go off? Because between the Lashers and the Rockefellers, the second or third or fourth cousin.
I don't know. I never came across anything like that. I knew who the Lashers were, and I knew that they were related, but we didn't do any, like we didn't have any family gatherings with them. Same thing. The Crawfords, Daddy and Janet had a sister and a brother, and but that was pretty much it.
Who was the lady on Maple Avenue, I think it is, who called Mommy and Daddy every morning just to let them know that she was still alive? It was a Lasher.
That was a Lasher, yeah. But I think she was like a
cousin?
Twice. Yeah, it was a cousin, some cousin. I can't remember her name, but I know she was up on. Yeah, that's enough. There's a lot of stories.
Yeah. The Rockefeller Family Association used to have reunions until about 1910, 1911, somewhere in there. Do you know why? Did any of that? Were those reunions still going on when you were a kid? Or?
Not when I was a child, but I did talk to my grandmother. She was a Rockefeller, and she went to those reunions, and it was like they were still going on in the 30s. I know 30s, I think even through the 40s. But I don't think any of our relatives went to any of those reunions, but they were big. According to my grandmother, they were really, really big functions, and there were thousands of people, thousands of Rockefellers.
Yeah,
not thousands, probably hundreds.
But there are thousands.
Yeah. And that's a problem when you try to do something like Ancestry. Is there's so many out there. You really have to dig and find out. Be careful, but who is this Rockefeller from Ohio? No, he's not related.
Well, not in the way you think.
Yeah.
Did your grandmother or any other relatives ever talk about John D. Rockefeller Sr. coming to Germantown Standard Oil?
Oh, no, I know who he is.
Yeah.
No. The joke was, and this is true, there were two Rockefeller brothers that came from Germany.
Yeah. Well, a cousin.
They were
first cousins.
They both came across.
Yeah.
And one settled in New Jersey and one settled in Germantown, or New York.
Yeah.
And they never got back together again.
Well,
They never.
They didn't, but their grandkids did.
Yeah, but
Grandkids.
the
So-
Rockefellers in
but those-
Germantown never got any of the money.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
story. That's
but that the cousins there, in John D. Rockefeller's family tree, yeah, Harold, the grandkids got married. So,
Oh, yeah.
so he descends from New Jersey and New York.
Oh,
Rockefellers
okay.
both. For some reason, yeah, the money, the branch of the family doesn't like acknowledge Germantown too much.
Right. No.
Although they do
It's-
have
it's-
us, they did settle around here, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, they're here. Yeah, they're here. And there's a footnote in the book, that says, you know, that they were, it didn't get to, yeah, they were related.
John D. Rockefeller's grandfather was actually born here in Germantown,
Oh, okay.
possibly in the Simon Rockefeller house on Main Street.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't even know that house was a Rockefeller house until till I was a teenager and I started doing it because it had already been bought by somebody else. Is that the house that it's trying to think who owns it, who used to own it or who owned it. It's right on
But before Route 8 bends where Eastern Parkway comes in,
yeah.
it's back a little bit.
Yeah,
It's
and it
very-
used to be a horse farm
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
and
Oh, Holly Brown.
yeah,
Oh,
Holly Brown Ranch.
Yes,
That's when I was growing up, that was a horse farm. Yeah.
That's nature preserve, most of it.
Oh, really? Is that right?
You can walk all through there.
Yeah, I had, that was Dave Brown, who was my classmate in Germantown. I think, yeah, they lived there. That's where he lived. And his father was coach in Germantown for a while. As I recall.
Oh, he was the.
Tim was remembering Brown as a coach.
Yeah,
History teacher. Baseball,
yeah, right. History teacher, that's right. He was. But his father was, yeah. Yeah, Dave. I lost track of Dave. Well, he became a teacher too, but I think he was down in Red Hook. Is he down in Red Hook? Do you know Dave Brown?
So it doesn't ring a bell, but.
Okay. I know I ran across him in my travels
Yeah.
long ago.
Do you remember,
Yeah.
can I ask you about some of the important people of town who may have been old men when they were
Yeah,
young? Do you remember Mr. Ostrander, Harry B. Ostrander?
Harry Ostrander.
Former principal of the school.
Yeah,
Lived on Main Street.
yeah. I didn't have I know where he lived and he was there when I was there, but I never had any dealings with him. I don't know his name. The only other one that I did was Bill Music.
Yeah.
Bill Music, you know, he was the finance guy for Germantown School.
50 something.
Yeah.
I think he's still the longest tenured GCS employee there's ever been, because he was there for 55 years.
He was there for a long time. When I came back from the army, he was still there. But his son, Billy, and I were classmates also. Billy lives up in Lithgow, I think. So but they were primarily in Lithgow. But his father was, I played baseball with Billy and his father on the baseball teams. And,
You remember,
Billy
you
Music was-
remember Harold O. Deniger lived on Main Street near where the old road that connects Crawford Lane and Lower.
Oh, the Deniger, yeah. Yeah, and he had the pig farm right next to your property.
Yeah.
Not your property, no, David, Sam and Ellen now, you know, the property that goes down where Jen is living? Well, that used to be Deniger's. And they had a farm, he had a pig farm. The reason I know that is because every year he would butcher a pig and we'd go up and watch him butcher it. But yeah, he lived on the corner.
I have some pictures when he was a younger man who tried tomato farming. On that hill.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like some experimental tomato farming.
That doesn't surprise me
On the hill down by the river, you mean?
Uh,
Okay.
in that area. Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, the barn that's behind the new barn up there, up at the corner. David built
On
it
Jennifer's property or on our property?
on your property. Yeah. David built that barn, but the barn behind it, it might have belonged to Denninger. That's why.
Right. Would you think the creek's on this side, on the other side of it, on the back side of it?
Yeah,
his wife was a Rockefeller, so that's how he got that. Yeah, you guys were related
yeah.
through his wife. And that's why he had land on Main Street and then he's north of there too.
Yeah, I've forgotten that. Yeah, but I don't know. I could be wrong. But that barn was there since 1930. I do remember it there.
Wasn't there another barn closer to the circle where the circle is?
No, there was that barn, and then there was his barn, which is on the other side of the creek. Oh, is it still there?
Yeah.
They must have remodeled it or renovated it.
And there's a pond right behind that old barn that you're talking about on our property.
Yeah.
You remember Henry Lawrence, the insurance guy? And he ran a store. When he was younger, he was running a store, but like in 50s, 60s, I think he was selling insurance before he retired.
On the corner?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was in business
The
with,
light, for a long
Mr.
time.
Price.
Oh, yeah, he was in business for a long time.
He lived down somewhere in that area too.
Where did he live?
I think right next to Stewart's. Because his brother lived in your house. David, the house.
On Main Street. Yeah, before it was moved.
Whose brother lived there?
Before it was
Lyle
moved.
Lawrence lived there,
Right.
and Henry Lawrence.
Okay.
Yeah, those two houses. Yeah, they were Lawrence's. Yeah. Those houses.
Yeah, but I memories of him.
Not really. I mean, I know the name and probably pick them out, but did you write anything about Rashi's grocery store on the corner?
Yeah, there's a picture or two in the Gibson photo archives.
Okay, because that was a popular place with kids.
Yeah.
Because-
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that belonged to the Lawrence brothers. That belonged to their father, Henry Arthur Lawrence. I think
Okay.
he's the one who built that building,
Okay,
and he ran a store out of it.
yeah,
In the
Yeah,
70s, 80s.
it's been a store forever.
It's been a store its whole existence. Yeah.
And it was, when I was growing up, it could rival Central Market. Because it had groceries in there, but a lot of, but it was small. If you needed a carton of milk, you would go to Rashi's and pick up a carton of milk. But instead of going all the way to Central
All the
Market.
way. All around foot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, what, since we're on that corner, remember Baxter's Garage?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Baxter, yeah, there was a lot of business went through there. I know my dad would, he had a problem if he had a problem with a car, he would do it himself generally.
Yeah.
But Baxter he was pretty busy. They had a lot of business there. I'm trying to think if we were ever involved in anything. I don't think so, but he was a big, he would sponsor stuff for the kids, for the youth. I think he had a baseball team. And he sponsored a baseball team. Before the store on the corner there, that's when David moved the house. That's when the gas station came.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that corner.
Do you remember, I think it was 1965, do you remember the cold storage catching fire?
Yeah.
No,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we were, I mean, we were in the house.
Yeah.
We weren't allowed to
I'm
go
sure
in
you
there.
can see it.
Yeah,
Probably.
we saw it. Yeah, oh, yeah, you could see it in our house. And we went down there the next day
Okay.
and told to get out of there. But yeah, it was definitely.
Were there
Destroyed.
any other big events, fires like that done?
I can't remember anything else catching fire.
Accidents, things like that.
Yeah. Well, I can remember, no, I guess it wasn't me, but the Anchorage, when the Anchorage burned. I think I was alive for that. Do you remember what
Anchorage?
year the Anchorage burned down?
My understanding is it was taken down piece by piece. And they salvaged the lumber. That was 1958.
Yeah, but it had a fire before that, right? Or some sort of,
I thought they had a fire.
something about it, some sort of catastrophe.
Well, that's how Bruce Bonesack.
Yeah,
died.
AJ Bonestad was
Yeah.
hit in the head, I guess, by a fallen.
Oh, that wasn't a fire.
They were taking,
Oh,
they're taking it down piece by piece.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I thought it was a fire.
Yeah, the
I
town
was too
board,
young for that.
yeah, the town, it needed a roof and I'm sure it needed foundation work and some other things. So
Yeah.
Rather than fix it, the town board was to tear it down. So,
I know my dad was involved in that a lot, the Anchorage, because he had a boat. He raced boats on the Hudson River. Anybody told him about that?
no,
Yeah.
why don't you tell us about
Yeah,
that?
tell us about
Well,
the boat club.
well, the only thing I know, yeah, the Rodin.
Sailboat Club is the.
Well, no, this
What
was-
What was the name of the?
This was in the 30s. My dad raced. He had a race boat on the Hudson River, and he was part of that. I think it was the Rojan Boat Clubs, was where they were located. But
No, well, the
no,
Rogan-
before that,
Yeah, Rojan
before that, at the Anchorage. Yeah, they would put their boats in at the Anchorage.
Rojan started in 53, I think, in large part because that club. in
Yeah.
Germantown closed.
And I think there's a picture, a movie, a video of my dad racing on the Hudson River
Oh, okay.
with his boat. It doesn't show too much of where it came from and where it was going or anything like that. I just know that he was part of that.
Yeah.
Is there any ice boat racing videos? Are there any of those?
Trying to remember if there are. I remember seeing pictures. There might be, I don't know, because that was in the, I thought that was in the 30s.
So when was
ice boating.
the boating that you're talking about? When was that happen?
Oh, that was in the 30s also. There were pictures.
Noontime.
Yeah. Oh,